That being said, I'll turn it over to our host tonight, Carla Zibnik-Sicer. Go ahead, Carla.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to welcome everyone tonight to our Women in Investing. We're very fortunate to have our speaker. I'll introduce you in a minute to her, but we want to have a special thank you to Terry Saby, who from Nationwide did allow us to have Roberta as a speaker tonight. So we thank Terry and we thank Nationwide. We have offices in a couple different states, Minnesota and Wisconsin. We have clients in more than 25 states. So we are all over the United States with our clients. Some of our advisors, Thomas Staffager, Trish Biney, Kevin Seifzer, Kim Needfeld, Dave Johnson, Mark Thompson, Angela Gertz, Nathan Olson. We also have a few people that are in process of getting licensed with our firm. And our goal at ClearStep Financial is to help educate and guide our clients through our ever-changing financial world. Part of the process is to offer educational webinars. So to accomplish this goal tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce Roberta Eckert from Nationwide Financial. She is the director of the Nationwide Institute. She travels around the country, delivers retirement presentations, and she's their top speaker and educator. And we greatly appreciate Roberta. So thank you, Roberta, for being here on the call. And Roberta, just to confirm, I think if people do have questions, either they can ask in the chat, or I believe at the end that you'll have time for questions, correct?
That's correct. So actually end is good, because so often we get questions and it's almost like they know what slide's coming next. So yeah, so we'll hold them till the end. We'll leave a little time for some Q&A. And that seems to be what works best most of the time. Thanks. So it looks like, Carla, anything else you'd like to add? I see you've gone on mute. So I will take it from here. So thanks everybody for joining us. We are really pleased to be able to deliver this content to you all this evening. And as part of our Women in Investing series, this kind of takes a little bit of a turn and concentrates a little bit more on retirement. And, it just seems like when you start working, you're already thinking about retirement, no matter where you are along that path. And we've realized at Nationwide, as we put together different programs for our listening audience, that really when it comes to retirement, we all want to get to the same place one day. We all want to perhaps retire, or when we retire. Not everybody's desperate to retire, which is kind of interesting. But when everybody is retired, they want to be healthy, certainly. They want to be financially secure. They want to be able to do the things and maybe have a second or an encore that allows them to meet those desires of what they thought about the whole time they were working. But at the same time, people do have different journeys. And we realized that women, especially, have a different journey to retirement. And it's based on a couple of things that we're going to talk about this evening. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I do want to tell you, as we start getting into our program this evening, that, of course, I work for Nationwide. We've got a great relationship with ClearStep. And in our presentation tonight, I'm going to talk about a bunch of things, but I'm not going to talk about a few things. Number one is I'm not going to be giving you any tax advice. I'm not giving you any legal advice. And although I do have my credentials to be a financial advisor, I'm not your financial advisor. The folks at ClearStep are. So I am here purely from an educational standpoint. And moreover, even though Nationwide has some interesting products that we utilize along a variety of business units, like annuities or life insurance, we're not going to talk about any of that tonight. We're really here just to educate you about retiring comfortably and happily. So with that, the three main things that we're going to discuss tonight. Number one, longevity. We have a lot of information about that, but the takeaway, that the cliff notes are, we're going to live a long time. Second, how can we optimize the retirement income sources that are coming into us and making sure that they're kind of aligned instead of just looking at each one independent of one another. And then there's something we really need to make sure that we don't overlook, and that is healthcare, and then the aspect of long-term care. So these are all not uniquely women's issues, but they really have women really have a focus on them for a lot of different reasons. And we'll get started with just a couple of thoughts as we level set. First of all, we women are more in control of our finances than ever before. Now, this has got a lot of statistics, I guess, and numbers for you, so I'm not going to read the slide to you, other than to say that females really have made incredible strides in so many different areas. Like you think about politics or business or pop culture or education or whatever it is, women have really made a lot of different strides in those areas. And consequently, when it comes to money and finance, we are earners and primary breadwinners more than ever before as well. And you can see there, again, the statistics, more than 5 million women have salaries of over $100,000. Actually, the minute we put together a presentation, the numbers shift a little bit. So now it's more than half of women earn the same or more as their partner. And the one thing also that I really want to draw out is that we're decision makers. Now, if I said to my mom, "Are you a financial decision maker?" she would say, "Well, yes, of course. I pay the bills and I make sure, that you guys have, we're looking at all of the different things that affect the day-to-day financial running of the household." But in this case, we're talking about financial and investment decisions. And we're seeing this number just, if you think about a clicker where those numbers just spin, it's more than 30% now and going north all the time. We also drive a lot of consumer business and spending. So we're really financial powerhouses, and it's even getting more interesting. And the number I kind of like the cadence of this 30 by 30, is that right now we're controlling or influencing close to 11 trillion, that's trillion with the T, of household financial assets. And we're expected to close about 30 trillion by the year 3030. That's the cadence I love about 30 by 30. We're adding trillions of dollars to global wealth annually. And yet at the same time, when we did some research and talked to a lot of women, as no matter where they were on this journey to retirement, we said, "So what is it? Tell us about retirement." And a lot of them, the majority, said, "We're just uncertain about what retirement looks like for us. We're uncertain about how to prepare. We're uncertain about what's all involved." And so despite all of those strides financially, controlling wealth, building wealth, and all that stuff, women still are unsure about what to do to really make their retirement as secure as can possibly be. Well, you're starting out by really making a great step tonight by attending our webinar. But here's something I would encourage everybody to do, and that is think about your own dream for retirement. So really visualize that. What do you want to do? Who are you doing it with? Are you going to be working? Those days of thinking of retirement as the holy grail are gone. People want to work. They want to be relevant. They want to have that social aspect. It might not be the same job you had when you had bills to pay. Well, everybody's got bills to pay, but it might not be in the same kind of capacity. But people really do want to continue doing something. And don't think of working necessarily as paid work. It could be volunteer work. It could be a host of things. So what do you want to be doing? And what does it look like? And again, who are you going to be doing it with and how often? All of those things that I encourage people to really sit back and visualize that. Now, before that sounds a little touchy-feely, I'm going to suggest a couple of thoughts surrounding this couple. Now, if I were standing in front of you, I would say, do you know who this couple is? And admittedly, it is a trick question because it is a picture of my mom and dad. I gotta love this. It was taken in 1944. My mother was all of 22 years old. You gotta love the fur coat, My father, captain in the Army, perfect example of greatest generation. Why am I showing you a picture of my parents? Well, first of all, they're cute. No, that's not why I'm showing you. The reason is because if I went to my mother and I said, "Hey, Mom, tell me what your retirement looks like," she would look at me like I'd grown a second head and said, "What do you mean my retirement?" I guess when it comes to retirement, and that's really, your father's deal, he's got the Army pension. He's been saving and investing. I guess, if you think about retirement, from my standpoint, it would be maybe traveling, visiting grandkids, that kind of stuff. But my mother never would have conceived of a retirement based on her own goals and her own needs and desires. And so I would suggest that for many, many women that we speak to, there was no real example set or role model of a woman that was ahead of them in their family that really set a retirement on their own terms. It was almost always as a function of what their husband did. And so that's why I'm a strong advocate of saying, really visualize what it is you want to do. It's very possible you may be the first woman in your family that, again, has set a retirement path based on your own terms and what you want to do, and not a function of someone else. Now, with that, we still have some challenges ahead of us, and these challenges are not exclusively unique to us, but they are unique to us in that they affect us more than any other demographic group. One of them is longevity. Now, statistically speaking, we are going to outlive our spouses if we have one. Now, first of all, here's the good and not so good news. Time is on our side, so all of the visualization you did a couple of slides ago, you're going to have a long time to enjoy all that you have planned and sacrificed and thought about and fantasized for and visualized. So you got a long time to do that. But at the same time, because you will have a longer retirement, you need to fund it. And so you might have a gap in your retirement savings. And this could be strictly a function of life expectancy. If you did everything exactly the same as a male counterpart, it's possible that your male counterpart might not have a gap in retirement savings, and you would. Why? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're going to live longer, statistically speaking. Now, when it comes to that, and you're thinking about retirement savings, it is not necessarily the case that if you tracked your male counterpart step by step, they're going to have the exact same earnings. So part of this challenge drives or dials into lower earnings. Now, before I get too far in this topic, I do want to point out that we're not talking about mean companies that pay women less than men for the same job, although there is still some of that. But today in America, women earn about 82 cents per on each dollar that men make. Now, again, that's not because of a differential in getting paid less for the same work. There are several things at play here. One of them has to do with, air quotes, traditionally female work, and groups that are starting to or are in retirement now. They might have spent their entire careers in that traditionally female work. So, for example, things like healthcare, hospitality, teaching, those jobs don't pay as much as CEO of great big company. Happily, we're seeing many more women as CEOs of great big companies, but it just didn't work out that way. In fact, when you think about jobs that women had back maybe in the 70s, it was almost legal to discriminate and give those jobs, the higher paying jobs, to men. In fact, I'm almost embarrassed to admit that this was the case. When I was in high school, women couldn't have check or credit cards in their own name. Like, it sounds crazy to think about it now, but it's the case. So when you're thinking about lower earnings, that's one component, is the traditional female jobs. The other component is the fact that we are the ones that step up to become caregivers. And right now, I'm thinking about caregiving for a younger generation. Really, caregiving is an intergenerational aspect, but I'm thinking about caring for a younger generation. My stepdaughter is a perfect example of this. She started having children a little older than, quote, average. She is due to deliver her fourth child on her 39th birthday. Now, she graduated from University of Virginia, had a job in Washington, D.C., but when she started having children, she stepped out of the workforce to raise the family. One day, maybe she'll go back, but she's going to have 4 kids that she's chasing around. And so consequently, she has stepped out of the workforce, and that drives to lower earnings as well. Now, one of the things or consequences, if you will, of lower earnings also plays into a lower Social Security benefit. So it's important that we chat about that for just a few moments because there are a lot of people that don't quite understand how a Social Security benefit is calculated. And again, when you're thinking about income in retirement, Social Security is arguably one of the biggest income sources in retirement. Now, we're talking about any Social Security benefit that you would receive based on your own work. Now, the way that your benefits are based is paying into the system. So there's some calculations involved. We won't get into that this evening. But essentially, if you are looking at your Social Security check, what they're going to do in order to calculate it is they're going to take your top 35 years of paying into the system. Then they apply a formula to it, and that determines your Social Security benefit. Well, if I had 30 years of earnings and took a 10-year break, well, that means I've got 30, so essentially a 40-year work career. But if I had 30 years of earnings and they need 35 years in order to calculate my benefit, well, they are going to have to put something on years 31 through 35. And what they will do is put a zero on those lines in order to come up with the calculation. And consequently, I might not have as big of a Social Security check as if I had worked 35 years or longer. And by the way, if I worked for, say, 45 years, then what will happen is they will cherry pick the top 35 years of earnings in order to determine my benefit. So the more years I have of earnings, the potentially higher my Social Security benefit would be. Now, at some point, and we talked about this actually on a prior webinar that I did for Clear Choice, but we could talk about Social Security ad nauseum at some point, maybe next year. But it is important to note that what I'm talking about right now is your own benefit, but you certainly might be eligible for benefits maybe off of a spouse instead. So even if you didn't work at all out of the home, outside of the home, all is not lost when it comes to Social Security. Well, that's one way of optimizing retirement income is, working at least 35 years, or I should say, paying into the system for 35 years. But we're going to talk about some other thoughts as well, too. And before we get into specifics, we'll look at the big picture. Women, the good news is that women are really taking charge of retirement planning. So when we did some research and some studies, we found that almost 75% of women say we've got a plan to help protect against outliving savings in retirement. And that is really, really great news. And on the surface, it looks like that's the end of the story. Nothing else to see here, except for a couple of things when we poked at this a little bit. One thing was, okay, well, that's good that you're not going to outlive your savings in retirement, but is your savings going to be enough? Coupled with Social Security, is that going to be what you need in order to pay your bills in retirement? And also, there were some things that women hadn't really considered in any great detail. And those are listed right there. Tax-efficient retirement income, or put another way, how can you draw money out of your different income sources in a tax-efficient way? Also, making sure that Social Security benefits are examined and making sure that those benefits work to your best advantage. And then third, when it comes to income planning, you don't want to overlook what could be some of your biggest expenses in retirement. One is healthcare. The other is the strong possibility of a long-term care event and making sure that that's being planned for too. And so we're going to take each one of these and talk about each, maybe not in some great depth. But I'm going to come back to Social Security, and this is one of my very favorite statistics. This is not relevant to women exclusively, but when we did some research, we went to a large group of, or a group of people anyway, pretty large, and we said, listen, do you know everything, every lever that you can pull in order to maximize your Social Security benefits? And 54% said, oh yeah, we know how to do that. We get it. We understand. And we said, well, that's wonderful. Tell us what those levers are. And only 6% could identify them. So there's definitely some overconfidence in understanding how Social Security works. And because of that misunderstanding, people can miss out on some benefits and how to create a plan using Social Security in order to make sure you get the maximum benefits. Well, one thing that many people, in fact, more than 62% of baby boomers are unaware of is, what is your full retirement age? Full retirement age is the age at which once you become that age, you are eligible for 100% of your Social Security benefits, whether they're benefits that you earned from working, whether they are benefits that you're earning or that you can receive as a spouse or a survivor. But you'll get 100% of those benefits if you wait till this age. If you take those benefits before that age, they will be reduced. Now, you can see here from the chart that depending upon your birth year, that's going to drive your full retirement age. If you are 66, or pardon me, if you are were born in 1957, your full retirement age is 66 and 6 months. If you were born in 1960 or later, your full retirement age is 67. But nobody has a full retirement age of older than 67. And nobody has a full retirement age of 65. That's a big misunderstanding, because the full retirement age used to be 65. It lines up really nicely with Medicare claiming, but if you claim your benefits at 65 years old, you will receive some kind of a reduction. It might not be gigantic, but why leave money on the table if you don't have to? So full retirement age, that's the magic age that you want to be aware of. Now, having said that, half of American women leave money on the table because they claim benefits early. And if you claim your benefits before full retirement age, then you will receive a reduction in benefits. Now, more than 50% of people also thought that even if they claimed early, that once they became full retirement age, that their benefit would automatically increase and ratchet up to the higher amount. It's not true. Once you claim your benefit, that is pretty much locked and loaded. And the only way it would go up is if you then were eligible for another benefit, such as a spousal or a surviving spousal benefit that you could claim. Now, your benefit will also increase every year by the cost of living adjustment. And this year, it has been announced for next year at 2.5%. That's another way in which you'll see a benefit go up. But it's not this year or next year. It's not going to be an enormous amount. So what can you do about that? Well, that's where you might want to work with your advisor at ClearStep to say, look, I get it. What kinds of accounts can we draw upon, or can we create a strategy to supplement or to replace the Social Security check that I was thinking of getting, so that I can wait till full retirement age and therefore get a bigger benefit? What income streams could I draw on while I can wait to receive my benefit? And those are things that the ClearStep folks work with all the time. Now, I mentioned a time or two that there are other Social Security benefits that you might get depending upon really your marital situation. And we'll touch on those for just a couple of moments. And one of them, well, let me go back for just a minute. If you are a single person, we don't really have a big slide about that, because your Social Security claiming is fairly cut and dry. I like to think about Social Security as an asset that you have. And unlike some other assets, it's not something that you could leave, say, to the Humane Society or your favorite niece. If you're single, when it comes to Social Security, that benefit will pass away with you. It's not that there's a legacy involved, unlike maybe your IRA or your brokerage account. But if you're single, then the claiming strategy really revolves around how does it align with your other income streams, so that you can line up those different income streams, again, maybe from a brokerage account, maybe your 401k, maybe your IRA. How does all that work in concert so that you can get the biggest income you can? And so that's really the question. Take it when you need it, when it best aligns, because there's really no one else involved that should be taken into consideration when you claim your benefit if you're a single person. Now, when it comes to your marital situation, whether you're married, widowed, or divorced, then the whole thing changes, because then you've got other people involved in this decision. And we're going to start with married. If you are married, what will happen there is that you may be able to claim a Social Security benefit on your spouse. And the eligibility requirements are there. We're not going to get too deep in the weeds here, but just suffice it to say that for some people that had stepped out of the workforce and maybe went back part-time, or maybe not with a full blossomed career, it is possible that the Social Security benefit that they could draw based on their marital status, married, could be bigger than the Social Security benefit that they would receive based on their own work history. But do know that if you're married and you're claiming, the eligibility requirements are there, and you would be eligible for about half of your spouse's benefit, and you would be eligible for half of the benefit that they would receive on at their full retirement age. So that's something to consider. Your spouse would have to file their own benefit in order to provide you with the eligibility. But there are a lot of different strategies that are being floated around. Certainly Nationwide has some different tools and strategies that we can talk to your advisor about when it comes to thinking about that and really laying it out for you in the form of a report and spreadsheet and so forth. If you're a surviving spouse, one thing that makes this uniquely female is that more than 95% of this benefit is paid to women. Why is that? Well, because of one of the challenges we looked at earlier, life expectancy. Whether you are in a conventional heterosexual marriage or a same-sex marriage, a female is going to be the surviving spouse, generally and statistically speaking. So the way it works is that if you are a surviving spouse, you now have an option whether to continue with the Social Security check you were taking, say, based on your work history, or you could step into your spouse's benefit when they pass away, regardless of whether they had claimed or not. If they hadn't claimed, then there's still a provision made for surviving spouses to get a benefit. But the important thing to note is that the amount this time, instead of being half of what you would get as a spouse, you would receive exactly the same amount that your spouse was getting, the whole check. Now, clearly, if your own check based on your work record was higher than than the one you would receive as a survivor, you just stay the course and stick with your own check. It would be foolish to give up a bigger check to take on a smaller check. But for a lot of people, a lot of widows don't necessarily understand, unless they're working with a financial advisor, how all these rules work. So that's important. And also, it's amazing when we do presentations in person, and oftentimes people will come up to us afterwards and say, my parents got divorced. Mom didn't know she could claim off of dad, things of this nature. So it is important to understand that if someone has been divorced, again, the eligibility rules are there on the left, that you could still potentially claim a benefit on your former spouse. And if your former spouse passes away, you could still possibly be eligible for a Social Security benefit based on your former spouse as well. So there are options. There are a lot of options. And what we see is that people don't necessarily always understand how to put those options to work for them in order to maximize their benefit and get the biggest benefit that is available to them. And that, again, is where your financial advisor can come in very handy. We've got some tools and some reports that can lay it all out for you. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are over 2,700 Social Security filing rules. And so it's important to get some kind of mechanism that can lay it all out for you and let you know something that has been specifically created for your situation. The analyzer or the tool that I just referred to is very simple to create a report from. It is confidential. It is provided at no cost through your ClearStep advisor, and there is absolutely no obligation to do anything past that. So it is a very simple strategy to fill out a questionnaire. You will get a report back that includes pages that I have screenshots of, but it is one thing to have a report that's kind of a general idea of you might want to think about this or that, and quite another altogether to have a report that has been custom created for you and your own specific situation. So take advantage of it. It costs nothing. It's available to you through your advisor. There's no obligation, but it really helps to determine kind of a beginning strategy for how to set up retirement income. All right, so I promise we're not going to spend as much time on the next two subjects. Social Security can be a very deep well to go to. But one other consideration is tax-efficient retirement income. That sounds very involved, but taxes are on everybody's mind all the time, whether it's an election year or not. It doesn't matter, everybody's talking about taxes. And so the question becomes, you're saving your money in retirement for retirement, you're investing along the way. These things can kind of work in concert together, because when it comes to retirement, you want to be thinking of how can you engineer those withdrawals in order to make sure that your money has the potential to last as long as it possibly can. And I think, at the risk of sounding too simplistic, if I have $100 payment, say, I don't know, a water bill, and if I take money out of my retirement account to pay for that, I'm probably going to have to take more than $100 out in order to pay the bill. I take enough out to pay the bill, and I have to take enough out to pay taxes on that withdrawal, depending upon what kind of an account it's in. So if I don't have to take out, say, $120, but I can take out $112, then the rest of that stays in my account, potentially growing and compounding to help me have more money in retirement. So that's really as simple as it gets when it comes to tax-efficient retirement income. Now, as you're investing and saving, you can think about setting up some different accounts from a tax perspective. You're all familiar with diversification. You don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, and you don't want to have all of your investments in one particular area. But you also want to think about that diversification from a tax perspective. And if you can start putting money in each of three different categories from a taxable perspective, then when the time comes for you to retire and start taking money out, then you have the flexibility to kind of engineer where that money's coming from to potentially keep your tax bill as low as possible. So let's kind of look at these just as a quick review. One of them is a taxable account. You're paying taxes year over year, so there's not a lot of embedded tax liability in these types of accounts when it comes to take money out. So if you keep your money in a taxable account, a brokerage account maybe, that's not an IRA, then you could really, you could have stocks in that account, you could have bonds in the account, you could have CDs in the account. But if it's a account that's a non-qualified account, again, any tax that's incurred is paid each and every year, so that when you go to take money out, you don't have a lot of pent-up tax that you've got to pay. Also, one other thing that comes in the taxable category is a taxable portion of your Social Security benefit. Well, that implies that maybe there's a tax-free part of Social Security benefit, and that is true. Part of your Social Security benefit is tax-free. Not a great big part. For just about everybody, it's 15% at a minimum, but I'll tell you what, every little bit counts. So there you have it. When you move on to tax deferred, I would suggest that most people have most of their wealth in tax deferred accounts. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. You probably know this certainly from working with your advisor. but the money that you contribute to these types of accounts is not currently taxable. Any kind of growth or compounding in those accounts would happen without paying current income tax. And it's only when you take the money out that you pay taxes. And you don't have to take the money out all in one gigantic chunk. You can kind of string it out and be mindful of the tax implications on those accounts when you take the money out. Finally, there are tax-free accounts. Things like Roth. Anytime you see Roth in front of an IRA or a 401k, you want to start thinking about tax-free income. Certain municipal bonds, some cash that's been built up in a life insurance policy, health savings accounts. All of these kinds of things can provide you with income that's coming out tax-free. Now, one question I get sometimes is people say, well, why wouldn't I keep all of my money in tax-free accounts? And the answer is because the government doesn't let you. I mean, think about that. If everybody had their money where they could take it all out tax-free, nobody would be paying any taxes, and we wouldn't be able to run our government, I guess. I'm going to show you how this works kind of in action. I'm going to give you a quick example here. Let's imagine we have couple one and couple two. Now, couple one and couple two have the exact same things going on. They've been retired. They're taking $100,000 out of their retirement accounts. They're paying tax on that withdrawal. But this year they want to do something different. They want to take $20,000 out, $10,000 to pay for a retirement trip, and $10,000 for surgery. Well, couple one has pretty much all of their money in tax-deferred accounts. So when they go to take the $20,000 out, it's fully taxable. It's going to come out as the same account as their retirement income. So they are going to pay, they're going to pay $12,461 in tax. Well, couple two attended our webinar tonight, and they had the exact same idea, go on a trip and pay for some surgery. But this time they had the wherewithal to set up a Roth years ago. They have a health savings account. It's not our intention to get too involved in what a health savings account is right now, but just know that it does allow you to take money out tax-free for qualified health expenses, the surgery. And so as a result, couple number two is going to do the exact same thing couple one did, but because they're kind of engineered where their accounts were from a tax diversification standpoint, they are paying $3,385 less in tax than couple number one. That means that $3,300 sits there, continuing to potentially grow and compound for them in retirement. So a few ideas to discuss with your ClearStep folks. First of all, there's the idea of a Roth conversion. You hear that a lot. They'd be happy to walk through the details with you and see if it's an appropriate strategy. If you do have a possibility to contribute to a health savings account, usually that happens through your job. They can discuss that with you. Taking advantage of some of the tax codes right now, especially as it pertains to standard deductions. And think about where you're keeping your assets. For example, if I have an asset like 100 shares of stock that I might not plan on keeping really long term, I might keep, for a year or so. I'm going to buy it. Hopefully it will appreciate and I sell it. If I keep it longer than 1 year, then if I have had gains and I'm going to pay taxes on those gains, those taxes are considered long-term capital gains. And that is the tax that I would pay. And it's a much more preferential rate than ordinary income tax. So be thinking about where you're keeping some of your assets, and you might be able to take advantage of some of those preferential tax rates if it aligns with your investment strategy and your risk tolerance and all those good things. All right, lots of information to consider, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about spending money. We talked about saving, talked about Social Security benefits and how you might be able to maximize those. We talked a bit about tax efficiency and how you can keep more money in your accounts by adopting a tax efficient drawdown strategy. But we don't want to talk about we don't want to miss talking about some big expenses and making sure you've got those considered, and that's healthcare and its evil twin, I guess, long-term care. Well, a lot of times when people retire and they're 65 years old and they're going on Medicare, which is when they're eligible, there's some things that people tend to overlook because they're so used to their employer-sponsored healthcare benefits. It's almost like, well, Medicare will pick up right where my employer benefits left off. And Medicare doesn't work like your employer-sponsored healthcare plan. There will be some money you would pay out of pocket, as you do now. There are going to be some things Medicare doesn't cover. Public service announcement. We do have an entire program on healthcare costs and one on the ins and outs of Medicare. But when you think about what Medicare pays for and your healthcare costs, when it comes to health costs and medical costs, Medicare will pay for about 60% of what you incur. Private insurance, we're talking about things like Medigap or a prescription drug plan, that picks up another 18%. So we're at about 78% right now that's paid for by insurance. But at some point, you're going to have to dip into your pocket and pay for some of your healthcare costs. Again, not you do that now. It just might not be as transparent to you. Maybe if you're paying premiums through payroll deduction or things of that nature. But about 13% of your healthcare costs are going to be on you. And so it's important to understand what those could be and how that works. Well, the other concept of healthcare, and before I stop talking about the specifics of healthcare, what we're talking about there is just run-of-the-mill healthcare, not long-term care just yet. But I would suggest that healthcare is going to be one of the biggest bills or the biggest budget items that you have in retirement, and it's going to last for the longest period of time. Healthcare doesn't stop ever. It stops when you pass away. Anybody that doesn't have a healthcare expense, they must be superwoman if they don't have anything. But even just general checkups, mammograms, and colonoscopies, and your physical, those are all healthcare. So we're never going to escape that. So we want to make sure we've planned for that. The second thing is long-term care. We consider long-term care really a very female type of expense. And I'll tell you why that is in just a moment, but I think it's good to step back for just a moment and talk about what long-term care is, because there's still some confusion about what it is. It is an event. It's not a place. During COVID on the news, there were quite a few references to made to long-term care facilities. It's not a place. It's an event. And this event, it would means that if you can't live as independently and safely as you were able to once, then long-term care is a whole series of support and services that are provided and have been designed to help you with your everyday activities. As simple as that. And long-term care can be provided by people. It could be provided in different places. There's a whole range of what falls into the concept of long-term care. But again, it's been created to help someone live as independently and safely as they can when they can't do what's really considered everyday activities. Things like dressing, bathing, things, eating, using the bathroom, things like that. Well, there's some myths surrounding long-term care, and we're going to touch on each one of them and spend a little more time on the last one. Medicare does not cover the expenses of long-term care. If I have a long-term care event, so I need help dressing and bathing, say, Medicare won't pay for that. They will pay for care for a limited period of time, which is 100 days, and that's only after you have been admitted to the hospital for a period of 3 days or longer. So let's forget about Medicare. 64% of people think that Medicare covers long-term care, and it does not. Your health insurance, if you have private insurance or disability insurance, that won't cover a long-term care event either. And although back in the day when long-term care or the concept became a thing, and insurance became a way of offsetting some of those costs, a lot of those costs or a lot of those insurance policies only paid for your care if you were admitted in a nursing home. that has drastically changed. In fact, people that have a long-term care insurance policy, if they're going to make a claim off of that policy, more than 70% of the time they start in order to keep someone at home and hire someone or get some resources in to help them stay at home. So that's kind of a nice change in how those policies have evolved. But here's the biggie. This is why we call long-term care the double-edged sword. And that is, my spouse can take care of me. Well, let's kind of work through this for a moment. We females typically are caregivers. In fact, there's been some research done that we're hardwired for that. It's part of our prefrontal cortex that we're nurturers, we're caregivers, etc. A little earlier, we talked about intergenerational caregiving from the side of staying home maybe with the kids when they're little, but I'm going to look at the other side, and that's providing care for an aging relative, usually a spouse or a parent. Well, if I'm providing this type of care for my spouse, I can easily help my spouse bathe and get dressed, maybe transfer, meaning, get out of the chair and go over to the dining room table, things like that. I can do that. That is informal, unpaid care. All right, so I can do that. That's no problem. If he progresses, then I might need to make things a little more formal through other kinds of assistance. But for now, let's just kind of stick with the story. So statistically speaking, I will outlive my spouse. So one side of this long-term care double-edged sword is my providing the care. Now my spouse has passed away. And what if I need care? Remember, I'm going to live a potentially long life. So at some point, it's very likely I will need care myself. Well, just about every woman we talked to said, we are not imposing on our kids to provide the care. That is a hard no. So my spouse is gone. The kids are not in the picture there by my own choice. So now, where am I going to go to get care? And that's why we say so much for women. Plan for a potential event. At least it's in the plan. And second, the 3 questions you want to ask yourself are, if I have a long-term care event, where would I receive care? Who's going to provide the care? And third, how am I going to pay for it? So those are 3 questions that you really want to explore with your financial advisor at ClearStep, so that at least you have the contingency plan in your plan in the event that occurs and that you're prepared. So with that, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things, and they all revolve around really 3 different challenges for we females. One is life expectancy. The other is earnings gap that also can tie into that can tie into the role of caregiver. So earnings gap, life expectancy, role of caregiver, all of those kind of chase each other around and create unique challenges to women as we plan for and live in retirement. So a few things that we think about too, and you might want to pick off a couple of these and start working on them. But as you're starting to lean into retirement a little more, think about assembling a dream team. And your advisor certainly has contacts that they work with, centers of influence and so forth, such as estate attorneys or elder care consultants or tax professionals that they could make a reference and an introduction to. All of those people have unique specialties. So together they can provide resources for you. But as far as actual steps, make sure you're reviewing those beneficiaries. We preach this all the time. This is a great time of year to do that because it's year end and you're looking at planning. Make sure that your legal documents are in place, power of attorney, healthcare directive, all those things. Think about what your next chapter looks like. I hear time over time where people leave, sell their house, move to X, and they hadn't even tried it on. And they realize that wherever they go, Florida maybe, it's too hot. It's too fill in the blank, and they regret the decision. So, maybe hang out there for a few months, see if that works for you, see if it's viable. Have those next chapter discussions. What's it look like? Make decisions about future care. We just talked about that a moment ago. What's your retirement income strategy? Your advisor has some great ideas about making it as tax efficient as possible. And to be thinking about legacy. Legacy no longer means who's going to get your stuff, who's going to get grandma's engagement ring and those kinds of things. It's what do you want to be known for? What kind of stamp do you want to leave on the world? It doesn't always have to be great big, but it can be something that people would remember you for. And looking back, you would be really happy that that was the case. So a little bit of a recap, but just to summarize, remember that time is on your side. The good news is that all those things you visualized and fantasized about, you got a lot of time to live that out, but it's not going to be without cost. Make sure that you've investigated the options for a Social Security benefit. We talked about tax efficiency. Understand that once you become 65 and change healthcare, what's involved and what that looks like, and what are your choices and options there. And then also don't overlook healthcare costs, one of your biggest budget items, and the strong probability of a long-term care event. So take control. That's always great. One step at a time. All those platitudes we talk about the journey beginning with one step, et cetera, et cetera. But you made a great first step tonight by coming to our webinar. I deeply appreciate you attending and starting with your financial professional who already started with you here by inviting you to this tonight. So with that, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Carla. We're going to see if we have any questions. I've got a few moments in which I can answer a few things, or at the very least, I can provide Carla and team with some different resources if your question is very lengthy and involved. So Carla, what do we have coming in? I feel like a talk show host. Yeah. We have a caller that wants to know about X.
Oh, it does feel like that. Roberta, thank you so much. It was excellent information. These are all topics, whether you're on your way to retirement or whether you're there or you're in the near future or you have years before you retire. These are all good things to think about, discuss. And I know ClearStep, we talk about this a lot where we are in a changing world. This world is changing. There's so much that from an economic standpoint, like you said, Social Security is going up 2.5%, but we feel it more in our food and all our expenses, much more than 2.5%. So the cost of inflation is another factor. There's so many things to consider as we talk about retirement and bills and expenses and all of that. So just a couple things I wanted to mention. And then if anyone has any questions, you may want to think about some questions for Roberta since we have her here. But a couple things that really stood out in my mind is longevity, that we are living longer and women tend to live longer than men. And it's definitely something that we all need to be aware of. Whether you're a spouse, a woman in the marriage, it doesn't matter. Everyone, I think, is pretty much in tune with that. And those are all things we need to talk about. Taking control of our life, but you also dealt with not only retirement income, but also look at the healthcare and look at the expenses. So how do we go about doing that? The woman role model, I thought that was a really good point, Roberta. The gap in retirement savings, but the women years ago, are we the role model for the next generation because we look at the woman's role and how it's changed. The next chapter and the journey, these are all good discussions to talk about. What do you want that to look like? That next chapter of your life. What do you want to do? You made a good point. Not everyone is going to be working, but maybe you will work part-time, but maybe it's volunteering. How are you going to be, what are your interests? I hear a lot of people wanting to retire earlier than maybe what they thought before. And now there's so many different things they're interested in. And so not just working part-time, but just a whole new area of interest that they maybe didn't have time to get into before. And now they're very much interested in that. Leaving a legacy. What does that look like? Long-term care. Long-term care is a piece that the costs have gone up so much with the long-term care expenses. And that's another discussion for another time to get into a lot of details, but lot of concern with the long-term care too. But all of these aspects of retirement are changing. They're in major change. So, all right, I'm going to open this up for discussion. And questions. Anyone have any questions? You can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question for Roberta. If you have any questions. I know you talked quite a bit about, there's usually questions on Social Security. Like I said, the long-term care program is changing. So does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Carla, Madhura here.
Hi, Mahira.
Hi. So I was curious about the tax deferred investments. What would be a good strategy for tax deferred investment? Like when you need to pull out money from those, the number of chunks. Because one of the questions that actually came to my mind is if I had a tax deferred investment and if I do a withdrawal, which is depending on the tax slab, maybe it's in the first tax slab versus it's in the second tax slab, how will the taxation change exclusively for tax deferred savings? So let's say if I withdrew 40,000 versus let's say 75,000, what would the tax implications be? How do I go about thinking about that?
That sounds like that might be a question for you, but I can at least talk generally. So a tax deferred investment might be something like a qualified plan at work, like a 401k or a 403b, maybe an IRA, things of that nature. And then when you take money out, and I'm speaking generally here, it's fully taxable. Now, what some people do is, and I don't have a chart of our tax brackets that I can refer to right now. But what some people do is they say, okay, I'm going to take enough money out of my taxable accounts in order to go right up to the part where I am paying 12%. And actually, it's a structured or a layered tax system. You say you've got a bucket of money that you're paying 10% on, and then a bucket you pay 12 on. But once they get up to that level, before they start going into the 22% bracket, so the next dollar on top you'd start paying 22% on, they'd say, okay, I'm going to stop there with the taxable stuff. Now I'm going to look at my tax-free stuff if I need more money. So it's kind of like take money out of taxable accounts up till you get to a certain level. It's called stuff the bracket. And then once you start getting flirting with the 22% bracket, then you just move over and start taking money out of your tax-free investments. But as far as what would the tax implication on a $40,000 withdrawal be, it all depends upon your other sources of income and things of that nature. That's more of a tax preparer kind of a question. But Carla, I'll toss it to you and see what other comments you have to make about that.
Yeah. Well, that's why we recommend diversifying your leading up to retirement, right? Diversifying your tax buckets, because you have the taxable, which means you get a 1099 every year. That would be maybe savings or an investment, but that's liquid. Then you would have your tax deferred, which is 401k, IRA, pension, SEP plan, all those types of plans that you're going to eventually pay taxes on. You get a pre-tax amount going in because you don't pay taxes on that, but then eventually you pay taxes. So that's usually 59 and a half or older. And that's usually where that tax planning comes in, like Roberta said, to go up to that next tax bracket. Well, not to go into the next tax bracket, but to go up to that tax bracket. And then of course, the last is tax-free or tax advantage, where you never have to pay taxes. So depending upon where you're at, do you pull money from your tax deferred, or do you pull money from the Roth or the taxable? So those are all discussions as you get closer to retirement, but that's why it's important to be diversified with your taxes. So you can do a little bit more tax planning there. Tax, positioning yourself so you don't have to pay as much in taxes.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Carla.
Yep, you're welcome. Anyone else have questions? And we greatly appreciate you all being on this call. We're so thankful, Roberta, to have you. And again, thanks.
Great to see you again.
As well. It's wonderful. You're excellent with your information and bits of information. We didn't even talk about what Nationwide specializes either. You basically just talked about the women in investing, but Nationwide does specialize in the guarantee income field, and they have quite a robust annuity. If anyone is interested in getting more information on that, we can market just about anything out there. We're not captive, but we do use Nationwide for their robust leverage ability to take an asset and turn it into a guaranteed income stream. It's a wonderful asset to be able to do that, or a wonderful vehicle.
Thanks.
Yep.
And it's interesting because I spent a fair amount of time talking about Social Security because it's a really great program. And there are some, it's not our intention to talk about Nationwide products, but there are some products that kind of mimic or look like Social Security, guaranteed income streams. And a lot of conventional planning people, such as ClearStep and Carla, would say, listen, if you know what your essential expenses are anticipated to be, food, clothing, shelter, energy, and all that, line that up with your known income sources, your guaranteed predictable income sources. And then for the fun stuff, travel, entertainment, all that, then maybe, things like you don't have to do that, but you can. I mean, it makes retirement fun, but then those expenses are more discretionary, and you align those with variable sources of income. So if the year isn't good for you, then, if you don't go to Hawaii for 6 months, it's not the end of the world. Just saying. Nobody goes, well, I don't want to say nobody, but you get the idea. You don't have to take a trip, but you generally have to pay your heating bill.
Right. So you use those guaranteed income for your fixed expenses, for your monthly fixed expenses that you have every month. They're wonderful because years ago, people would retire with pensions. And how many people have pensions nowadays?
Very few.
They would retire with a three-legged stool, which was pension, Social Security, and then their own personal savings, right?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have the pensions like we did years ago. And if you do, then, that's all, you're lucky to have that. But that's why these guaranteed lifetime incomes that some of these annuities offer can be it can help people feel secure and confident in retirement.
Yes, that's very true. There's that kind of psychological aspect too. So.
Yep. Oh, sometimes we need that just to feel good and feel secure. A lot of life is about that. So very good. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to let Roberta go. She's traveling. She's out and about, and we appreciate you being here, Roberta.
Always. It's always a pleasure working with you. Thank you so much for having me.
So much. And you know what? In a couple of weeks, happy Thanksgiving to everyone as well.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of the evening. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.